Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into something truly profound. Václav Havel's The Power of the Powerless. It's basically a blueprint for a non-violent revolution that, believe it or not, starts with something as simple as a single act of defiance.
Okay, so let's jump right in. To explain this huge idea, Václav Havel, a playwright who would later incredibly become the president of Czechoslovakia, tells a simple story. It's a story that cracks open the secret mechanics of an entire political system.
So picture this. It's the 1970s in communist Czechoslovakia. There's a greengrocer, and every single morning, right there between the onions and the carrots, he puts up this sign. It's a state-mandated slogan. It's just what you do, a total ritual you'd see in shop windows all across the country. Now, here's the thing. The greengrocer, he doesn't actually believe in the slogan. I mean, he probably couldn't care less about the fate of workers in some far-off land. And his customers, they don't believe it either. They just walk right by it, probably don't even notice it anymore. So if the words themselves are basically empty, what on earth is the point?
Well, the sign's real message has nothing to do with workers uniting. It's a signal of conformity. This is what Havel called living within a lie. And it was millions of these tiny, seemingly insignificant acts of obedience that actually held up the entire regime.
Yeah, that one little sign. It was helping prop up this really unique kind of oppressive system that Havel termed post-totalitarianism. It wasn't just about raw power. It was about getting everyone to participate in a massive, shared fiction.
See, Havel argued that this system was a whole different beast from, say, a classic military dictatorship. A traditional dictator rules with brute force, right? But a post-totalitarian system, its power comes from a pervasive ideology. Its main control mechanism isn't just locking people up, though it does that too. It's this ritualized conformity, like putting up that sign. So, and this is the crucial part. By performing all these little daily rituals, every single citizen becomes complicit. Power isn't just in the hands of some guys at the top. It actually flows through everyone who just agrees to play along. They become both the victims and, in a way, the supporters of their own oppression. But hang on. If the whole system is basically a giant house of cards built on lies, what's its greatest weakness? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. The truth. And this is exactly where the powerless find their power. So let's really dig into what Havel called the revolutionary act of living in truth. Let's go back to our greengrocer. Imagine one morning he wakes up and he's had enough. He doesn't put the sign in the window. That's it. So, what happens then? By simply refusing to play the game, the greengrocer completely breaks the spell. He takes back his own identity, and he shows everyone that it's possible to live a different way. He creates this tiny, personal sphere of truth that the regime, with all its tanks and secret police, can't actually touch. He's the one who finally says, "The emperor has no clothes." And this quote just nails the core of Havel's philosophy. The Greengrocer's Act might seem totally insignificant, right? He's probably going to lose his job, he'll face persecution. But that single, quiet, moral act has immense political power, all because it exposes the entire system for what it is, a lie. So, okay, how does one person's private act of defiance actually grow into a movement that can bring down a whole government? Let's take a look at how this theory was turned into a real-world strategy that literally changed history. Now, the backdrop for all these ideas was this really bleak period called normalization, which came after the Soviet Union crushed the Prague Spring Uprising in '68. But dissent started to bubble up, and in 1977, Havel and a bunch of others published Charter 77. It was this human rights declaration that basically just called on the government to obey its own laws. And while the charter was incredibly brave for calling out the regime's lies, another dissident, Václav Havel, realized something. He realized people needed more than just protest. They needed a positive vision, right? A real, tangible way to live freely, even inside an unfree country. And Benda proposed this brilliant strategy, the parallel polis, which just means a parallel world. The idea was so simple but so profound. If the official world is built on lies, then let's just build our own alternative world, based on truth, right alongside it. And this wasn't just some abstract, academic idea. It was a real, practical plan. It meant creating tangible alternatives to the state. We're talking about banned plays being performed in people's living rooms, secret university seminars held in apartments, Books and magazines known as samizdat that were self-published, passed around by hand. Even whole economic systems based on trust instead of the state.
The impact of these ideas was, honestly, world-changing. And the echoes are still being felt today, way, way beyond the borders of the old Czechoslovakia.
And then it happened. In 1989, the nonviolent Velvet Revolution, which was fueled by these exact ideas, living in truth, building a parallel society, brought the whole communist regime crashing down. That house of cards, built on all those lies, it just collapsed. And the influence of the power of the powerless just spread like wildfire. It became the theoretical blueprint for Poland's huge solidarity trade union movement, which was absolutely instrumental in ending communist rule over there.
And its relevance has just kept going. I mean, decades later, activists fighting for their freedom in places like Cuba and Iran were studying Charter 77 and the strategies of the parallel polis, figuring out how to adapt them to their own struggles.
So that brings us to today. This idea of creating systems that are independent of the state, it's been revived, but in a totally new technological form, sometimes called crypto-anarchy. The idea is to use decentralized tech to just opt out of state control.
In fact, in Prague and Bratislava, there are actual physical spaces called parallelní polis that exist right now. They're basically a 21st century version of the same idea, but built with blockchain instead of secret printing presses. They're think tanks, they're even cafes that only accept cryptocurrency. Their explicit goal is to build parallel economic and information systems totally independent of the state.
And all of this brings us to Havel's final challenge, which is really a challenge for every single one of us. In a world full of social media pressure, fake news, and all sorts of new rituals of conformity, what does it actually mean to live in truth today? It's a question worth thinking about, because it seems that the simple, quiet act of choosing truth, well, it's still the most powerful form of resistance there is.